absolutely. Hey, everyone, let me say hello to everyone that I know. Hey, Sam, you're on mute. Andre, Connie, hey, Connie. Ted is here. Dwight, Tara, and a couple more I don't know, but I look forward to getting to know. Good evening, everyone. It's good to have you all. As Renee mentioned, I'm kind of the brainchild behind this, but in all honesty, I don't do any of the work. I'm just kind of told to show up, the time and the date, and I am here. Renee, she puts a lot of work and effort into it. She understands the vision of the group is solely to network and to provide education and to provide any support that we can provide from SciQuest as a company, but also collectively as well, because there are some relatively new companies that are members, and there are some old heads that are members. Sam, no offense, but you've been around for a minute, as well as we have. We have been around for 15 years, but I am constantly learning, especially from people like Sam, and I appreciate mentors such as himself, who really don't consider themselves a mentor, but he certainly has a wealth of knowledge, and he is constantly teaching me and mentoring me, even though he doesn't know that, but that's what he is doing. And okay, we are just here to collaborate and to talk about how we can grow our businesses and to educate ourselves. We're not here to hawk any products. We don't do that. We have we should have everyone's capability statement in a database. So anytime that you are looking for any support on a contract, hopefully you will look within that database, or you will at least contact us to say, I'm working on this potential opportunity, and I need an AA company with expertise in these areas, and we can kind of send you some capability statements from members within our group that can provide support. So that is why we're here. I remember Renee saying our first couple of meetings, even though this is something we started, this is not our side hustle. We don't make any money. We're not looking to make any money. We're strictly looking to give back and support in any way that we possibly can. So that's why we're here.
Devane, let me interject here.
Sure.
I learned all I've learned from Andre and Linda. So those are the two that keeps me straight.
Okay. All right. Well, good.
Awesome. That's good to know. So for those of you who were not here last time, Sam Jameson gave us a great presentation and some information, and he actually referred us to our guest speaker for the evening, Linda Chapman. Linda says in a nutshell, she grows businesses. That's what she does. She founded Contracts and Grants, LLC in 1995. She's also, just last year, she's a founder of Contracts and Capital Sports and Entertainment, from winning fans to winning contracts. She has several accomplishments, including $13.2 billion in post-submittal activity, $412 million in contract awards since 2012, 122 GSA schedules with 100% success rate, and on and on and on. So without further ado, I will let Linda tell you a little bit more about who she is and a little bit about her company, and then we'll just kind of get right into the cost loading. Linda?
Fantastic. Hey, Linda, first, before you get started, thank you so much for joining us. It is nice to meet you. I had a brief conversation with Sam Thank you. I had a brief conversation with Sam on Friday, and he told me that you had you were a wealth of knowledge and that it was going to be a fantastic presentation. So welcome. We really appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for teeing me up, Sam. I look around the room and I see a couple of familiar faces. I thank them, I see some familiar faces. So that means that, I'm in the right place.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I've been in business, for 24 years. Been doing great things on the contracts and grant side. Was recently approached by the Atlanta Falcons to say, hey, we need to do something for our young athletes. So I decided to take this exact same thing I did with contracts and grants and small businesses and say, you know what, we can apply the same thing to athletes, celebrities, and entertainers. And that's how we came up with capital contracts and capital sports and entertainment. And we just train people. Entrepreneur development is my space. I love doing it. I love growing businesses. I love growing businesses through federal government contracts. And I know that people have a lot of questions about how I do that. And so, rather than, give you a long list, you guys can read it if you want to read more and kind of follow me and all the awards that I get on a given week or want to hear some tidbits of information, you can follow me on Instagram. I am Ms. Contracts and Grants. That's MZ. CONTRACTS and grants. And of course on Facebook, I am the real Linda Chapman. So I'm going to let you read and I'm not going to talk about me. I'm going to talk about what I can do to help you get going into federal government contracts. And I can tell you the number one thing that keeps people from winning at the table is the inability to cost load. So that's what we're going to get started today. And when you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay, Linda, let me interject one thing for our newbies. Typically, we are being hosted in someone's office, and we would have, some wine, cheese, and crackers and everything. So I don't want my newbies to think bad of me because I do have my wine. I will be drinking it. So just this is what we do.
Well, I got my bubbly. I got my club soda.
Okay.
So.
All right.
And
good.
I also want to let people know that if we'll collect questions in the chat. So any questions while Linda is speaking, if you have any questions that you want us to pose to the group, simply put them in chat. And once she's done, I will ask her those questions and she can answer them in front of everyone.
Okay, great. Now, one of the things I do, I like to think I'm a little different. I do a lot of public speaking at conferences and workshops. I'm actually a subject matter expert for Syracuse University, Florida State University, and LSU University in the area of government contracting. So I do a lot of speaking, but I try to, maybe give you a little bit of information, and so many people have so many questions. I always leave room for questions and answers because I've been on the other side, and I hate, raising my hand, want to ask, oh, sorry, questions and answers over, I'm sorry, so the speaker has gone on and on and on about them and what they've done, and I'm like, go read it on social media. I'm here for the questions. I'm gonna give you just enough information so that you can ask some questions, but I just want everyone to know that, I am here for the questions. I am here for the questions. So you tell me when you're ready. I'll share my screen and we'll get started. You ready? Okay, we're ready.
One other thing, Linda. At the end of the presentation, before we end the meetup, I do have one kind of special announcement. So for those of y'all who have to leave early, you miss out. Well, it's recorded. It's recorded, right, Renee? So, but I want y'all to hang around until the end. Ted, it's been a long time since I have seen you. It's good to see you, man.
Yes, it has.
I'm
man.
trying to figure out how I.
And I know Ted's on mute. Ted,
hey Ted, how are you?
Hey, I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm great, man.
Okay.
Good,
it says you've disabled
all right,
my
we got that out of the way. Linda, my apologies. You're on.
That's okay. That's okay. If you will give me screen sharing privileges, I will pull up something. If not, I'll just wing it. Okay.
Share the time. How about now?
Oh, yes. Okay, everybody. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about cost loading. I believe that it is the key to winning at the table. So I am going to go. All right. Here are the keys to cost loading. And I'm going to go through these and then I'm going to come back. But the reason I'm going to go through the 7 slides is so that you can understand what it is we're going to be talking about instead of going slide by slide. So I'm going to go through all 7, kind of speak to them and go through them one by one. We're going to be talking about the keys to cost loading. We're going to be talking about, I do a lot of posting, and this is one of the posts that I did that said housekeepers. And that's what we're going to be using as a case study today. We're going to be using a housekeeper or janitorial services so that you guys can really relate to what I mean. If you're charging by the room, you're either losing money or charging too much. On a firm fixed price contract, otherwise known as a flat rate, if your scope of work is a paragraph, somebody is getting cheated. Okay. All right, the next one is each item should be assigned a value, assigning a value to each one of your tasks associated with your scope of work. There are 3 areas that are used to produce a scope of work: time, quality, and price. If someone wants to negotiate, ask them to pick 2, the most important 2. If you think best value means lowest price, chances are you don't have one. Okay, so we're going to go back and we're going to start at number 1, the keys to successful cost loading. And I'm going to turn my light on so you guys can see me. Okay, well-defined scope of work, or PWS. A well-defined scope of work, and the reason that's important for cost loading is because if you're going to price something, you got to know what you're pricing. If someone sends you a scope of work and it's a 2-liner, you can't price that. Or if you price it, you're pricing it based on what you think they should have versus what they may actually want. So a strong PWS is simply something that's taken down and you've listed. Let's face it, each one of you do what it is that you do. You've been doing it for years. You know how to do it. You're going to need to take maybe a day, 2 days, or a week to break down each element of what it is that you do, because in order to do that, you can then assign a value to it. But you got to decide, this is everything that I do. Now, the one thing about that is, for example, I do proposal writing. I've been writing proposals for 24 years. If someone were to ask me for a quote about a proposal, it shouldn't take me a week. It shouldn't take me a few days. It should only take me a couple of hours, because now the steps I've already created, the only thing that is going to change is the quantities, how much of it you are going to do. So if you do janitorial services, if you do engineering services, whenever you do something, you have to break it down into the elements of each task. Otherwise, you're left to determine what you think someone wants, and they are left with deciding, oh, well, I got to take what he gives me. What if we have different definitions of what that is? Okay, so I'm going to show you an example of a well-written performance work statement. And this is just something as simple as a manufactured homes and travel trailers. It could be anything. You see the scope of work? It just doesn't say, excuse me. I'm sorry. It just doesn't say what it is. Okay, we're gonna go down. It tells you what the phase in is. It even has a phase in. Like when you first are awarded a contract, there's certain things that have to happen long before you even get on site. There's a phase in period. You got to do some training. You got to do some recruiting. You got to maybe onboard some people in HR. You've got to account for those tasks. So when you're trying to decide what you're going to charge for it, you have addressed every single element. So in this case, you're talking about maintenance, okay, cleaning, sanitation. They tell you these are all milestones of what this particular, they even tell you the definition in case you have a different definition of something. If you do what you do, take the time to put it all in one place. Define what you mean by I am going to maintain for 30 days. What does that mean? Does that mean that I'm available from 9 to 5? Does it mean that every time you call me, I'm going to run off to your office? What does maintenance mean? Define it, okay? And then you're talking about, here's right here. It tells you point per point. The contractor will, and it tells you what they're going to do. It breaks it down, the records. So everything that you do in your performance work statement should be milestone. Look at here. You got 1.3, then you got maintenance area of responsibility. That's section 2. They talk about the plumbing system, the electrical system, heating and cooling, replacement of components. Every single thing you do should be in the scope of work or the PWS. You know why? Because if you're doing something for a firm fixed price and they decide to add something or you know, well, most of the case, we call it scope creep, they add something. Well, if you don't have a clear idea of what you were supposed to be doing to begin with, you don't have a basis for asking them for an increase in price. Because now you get to say, well, you said we were going to do the plumbing and the electric. You said nothing about the heating and cooling. So having a well-defined PWS that speaks very specifically to exactly what it is that you're going to be doing. And the same thing if someone gives you one. If someone gives you a scope of work and it's 3 sentences, oh, we want you to, in Ted's case, oh, we want you to produce our, what they call it, the address, the CEO's address. We want you to produce it. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're just going to video it? Does it mean that you're going to put it on social media? Does it mean, what are you going to come set up? Are we supposed to have the equipment? You should have a well-defined PWS, okay? The next step is an assumption. That PWS is now, it has everything laid out. Well, what are the assumptions? The assumptions are those things that I believe that are standardized. For example, and I'll be using my case study, which is house cleaning. I remember a young lady came to my, when she gave me a call, she wanted to clean my home. And it was someone who referred, and she quoted the price off the phone. She asked me how many bedrooms I had, and asked me how many bathrooms I had. And she was like, oh, okay, I charge this. And I was like, really? I was like, well, why? She said, well, what do you mean? Because I've been doing this for so many years. I said, okay, well, you haven't asked me the square footage of my home. So maybe I have 5 bedrooms, but maybe 1 bedroom is 1,000 foot, you know? Or maybe all of my bathrooms are full bathrooms. Or maybe the design of my house is such that I have columns. So that's probably going to be a little difficult when you're vacuuming. So there should be some assumptions. So using that same example, the assumption should be that a bedroom is no greater than X amount of feet. Because if you think that the average bedroom is 600 square feet and mine is 1,200, that's twice the amount of time that you thought you want to spend cleaning my bedroom. So always put your PWS and your assumptions. Another assumption might be, okay, well, if you're cleaning a school or you're doing something for a school, I assume that I'm going to be working after hours, because if I'm working during hours, now I've got to do something extra because there are kids around, and maybe I can't, maybe there's certain items or supplies that are smelly or don't look right, or maybe these guys walking around with this PPE equipment might be scary to kids. So these are all kind of things that you have to take an account for, so that when you're pricing, you have to state what your assumptions are, because if that is not the case, you get to change your price because you said, I assumed that the bedroom was 600 square feet. It's 1,200 square feet. Ma'am, it's going to take me twice as long to clean your bedroom. Okay? So those are assumptions. Anything that you assume or anything that is standard in your industry should be stated in your assumptions. Okay? Next is determination of a unit cost. How do you come up with a unit cost? Well, in service industries, it's about quantifying. Maybe your unit is a square foot. Maybe your unit is an hour. Maybe your unit is 60 gallons or whatever it is. If you can figure out what it takes for one, you can figure out what it takes to do 1,000. But what you cannot do is base your assumption that someone is going to buy X amount unless they tell you that. Because in the day and age of government contracts, we have what is called IDIQs, where the government will give you a master service agreement, and then when they need something, they send you a task order. Let me give you an example of the worst case scenario I have ever had when a company did not have a unit cost, nor did they cost load. Client I had maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Okay, they won a contract and they were pricing it. And I noticed that they just took the total of the contract and divided it over 4 years. And I said, that's not right. You're going to incur more cost in the first year of the contract and less cost at the end of the contract. I suggest that you cost load your contract in year one. You're a transportation company. You've got to go out and buy all these vehicles. Okay. Now the government can, anytime the scope increases by 25% or more, the government has the right to end the contract and repost it, because the government has said, hey, wait a minute, you know what? We gave you these set of numbers, but it's really this set of numbers. And to be fair, we're going to give you an opportunity to come back and propose another cost because it may cost you more. So I'm telling my client, guys, when a contract is awarded, it is awarded on what they call TEP, total evaluated price. It's one price. So give them, if the contract is it's $1 million for 5 years. Don't look at it as $250,000 a year. That's just not the way it's done. But many people will do that because they don't know how to cost load. So let me tell you what happened. They didn't listen. They thought that the government would look at their first year and turn them down because they were too high the first year. Well, they didn't. They took the price and they divided it over 4 years. Guess what? The government ended up canceling the contract after 8 months because it doubled. Now, guess what they had done? They had gone out and bought 70 vehicles, but they spread that cost over all 4 years of the contract. Had they put that money in the first year of the contract when they actually spent it, the government would have had to pay that. The government was only bound to cover the first year of the contract. So when I tell you to cost load, because you always want to show the cost that you have incurred at the time when you're submitting a contract. Okay? So that's the importance of determining a unit cost. Now let's also talk about unit cost and how you come up with it, especially for people who are hourly. I'm hourly, okay? You want to quantify, well, some people just pull a number out of the air. I'm like, well, why is it $125 an hour or $50 an hour? Well, that's what the market says. Okay, well, the best way to determine your true value, not to say that you can't go higher or lower, you can certainly do what the market will bear. But the way you quantify it is you take the amount of money that you have been responsible for generating for you or for others. As a consultant, I look at the total amount of dollars I've gotten in contract awards, and I divide it over the period of performance. So I take 13.2 billion divided by 24 years. That's probably more than what the market will bear. But you know why that's important? So that when I do charge whatever it is I charge per hour, people understand, wow, okay, the true value is X, but market says this. But I have the ability to say, this is how I came up with this number. So whether it's hourly rates in consulting, or whether it's janitorial rates or engineering rates, you need to be able to justify how you arrived at your number. Sometimes it's a pay rate plus an upload of your G&A costs, but not, I won't say your indirect costs, your office space, and all the other stuff that has to go into an hour rate. So you may pay someone $10 an hour, but you may bill $30 an hour after you have increased your rate to support all of those things that go into servicing that particular customer. Okay? All right. Housekeepers, if you charge by the room, you're either losing money or charging too much. Back to our example. I explained it to her very clearly. You know, I wouldn't let her do it because I knew she didn't really understand. I said, you know what, I'm not going to let you do that, but let this be a lesson. And from now on, if you're not going to go visit a home and take specs of what the room looks like, at least come up with a unit cost that you know will be able to compensate you for your time. And in my world, I think that's probably square footage, because that is the closest thing. And if you decide that you can clean a room, it takes you 2 hours to clean a 3,500 square foot house or whatever, then at least you know that you have that number and it acts as a baseline. Okay? Firm fixed price contract, if your scope of work is a paragraph, somebody's getting cheated. Same thing we just talked about. You got to break those tasks all the way down, and then you want to assign a value to each one of those items. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour, but I guarantee you, if you will assign a value to every single task that it takes to do what you do, you will be shocked, because most of the time in your mind, you just say, okay, I'll do it for this. But did you think about those 10 things you had to do? And okay, this takes an hour, this takes 30 minutes. Oh, I assume that the client is going to call me at least once a day and ask me questions. So, okay, that's an hour of my time. If somebody spends an hour of your time every day over a week, that's 5 hours, 20 hours a month, that if you haven't captured, you're losing. Again, scope of work is having a strong scope of work with tasks and identifying a unit value assigned to each task is going to help you. Okay? Each item should have an assigned value. Go through that performance. Now, your performance work statement is going to be a forever evolving document, especially at first. When you just got to sit down and write down, okay, when I clean a room, let's see, I clean the bathroom, I wipe the mirrors, I clean the trash. You've got to write every single thing down, okay? And then again, put a value to it. Okay. 3 areas that are used to produce a scope of work: time, quality, and price. This is my favorite. Now, you give a client a price and you say, my price is $100. Oh man, wow. Man, you do really good work, but we're trying to get it down a little bit. I'm like, sure. How much do you want to get it down? Well, can you come down 20%? Sure, I can come down 20%. I can come down 50%. But you need to tell me what part of this scope that you're going to do. Because what you don't get to do is to decrease my price by 20% and not the scope. And so your price was what it was to get it done on time, with quality, and a great price. If somebody wants to negotiate that, take 2. Because let me tell you what happens when that happens. If they pick time and quality, it's going to be expensive. If they pick quality and price, it's going to take a little longer. If they pick price and time, quality is not going to be there. Let them decide what's most important, because what you don't get to do is you don't get to ask me to provide the same level of time, quality, and price for a 20% reduction. Let them decide what's most important. Okay? That's my favorite. That is my favorite. Okay? Now, in the government world, there's something called best value. There's also something called lowest technical price. LTPA, lowest technical accepted price. Okay? So that basically says we're going for the lowest price. But remember, one thing about the government, it is always best value. So it's your responsibility to explain to the government what your value is to make them want to pay more. I have another case study. Had a client, was in Qatar. The government wanted them to do something and wanted them to be able to mobilize, meaning get to Qatar within 30 days, okay? Everybody, to include my client, based it on a 30-day schedule, okay? My client came in at 5 million. The client awarded at 6.5 million. You know why? Because the winning, in fact, I still have the email. I use it all the time. Ms. Chapman, this is one of the best proposals we have ever seen. It is by far very well written, and we love the solution. Unfortunately, someone else was able to mobilize within 10 days. So the government decided it was worth $1.5 million more to have someone in country 10 days instead of 30. So even though the government, so the lesson to this is the government's always going to buy what is most important to them. But whenever you see maximums, don't think it is that as law. If the maximum is 30 days and you can do it in 15, propose 15. Now, if there's an additional cost associated with that, of course, you can indicate that in your technical. But only the government now, of course, the government will tell you in the evaluation factors what is most important. But just as a general rule, if the government says mobilize within 30 days, see if you can do it within 10. And so best value, especially with the federal government, even though it may say LPTA, even if it's the lowest price, but if it doesn't represent a value to the government that you know to be something valuable, that's where getting to know the agency is important. How does the agency like things fast? Does the agency, getting to know the agency that you are servicing will help you determine what is the best value. And once you determine the best value, that becomes your key discriminator, what sets you apart from the next customer. So I didn't want to get too deep in the whole cost loading and get too deep into indirect costs and G&A and all that, but I did want to give you a basis to understand why cost loading is important and what happens when you don't cost load. And it's as easy as placing a value to each task associated with what you do. Okay, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you very much, Linda. I learned a lot. So I don't know if you all want to, we have a fairly, we don't have a large group. I don't have any questions, but I would imagine people have questions. Does anyone want to ask a question? Everyone's on mute and being very well behaved. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
Since no one else will, I'll break the ice because I am definitely the novice here when it comes to federal government contracting.
Okay.
So when you speak of cost loading, does that mean making sure that you've evaluated all of your costs initially, listing everything, and instead of looking at the entire contract, looking at perhaps the first year of the contract?
Well, first, what you want to do is, let's not even make it contract specific. Let's just create a performance work statement for what you do. Okay? Because remember, your performance work statement is what you do right on down to the task level. So that has nothing to do with the contract. That's just what you do. So if you're going to propose your services to me, same thing when someone asks me about proposal writing. Well, what all does it include? Would do you check for amendments? I don't have to ask, because when I send you my PWS, it says what I do from the time I identify the contract, the opportunity, right on down to proposal submission, right on down to who's supposed to submit the proposal. So you got to take that time to just break it down, task item per item, per item, per item. Now, once you do that, what becomes contract specific is how much of that you're going to offer the government. So maybe you're only going to offer them, like in my case, okay? Maybe they just want me to find the opportunity. Okay. They don't want me to do pipeline management. Okay. So I've got pipeline management. I've got proposal review. I've got proposal writing. I've got proposal evaluation. So there's some people who write their own proposals and they just want us to review it before it gets sent off. So I don't have to send them the whole PWS. All I have to do is cut and paste that part of my PWS and send to them. And I can do it in a matter of minutes. I don't have to say, oh, well, can I get a proposal to you by Friday? And it's Monday. You've been doing this for 24 years and I got to wait till Friday for you to tell me how much it's going to cost to do what you've been doing for 24 years? They've gone on to someone else.
So you make sure you got costs associated with each one of those tasks.
I agree. Now that is the best way, because that's the only way you're going to have to determine when it's time to negotiate. Right. When it's time to negotiate, if you know you can pull out those costs, and then if you got it in a spreadsheet and you delete that, it now tells you what your cost is. So that person who wanted you to reduce your rate by 20%, you've cut this out, you cut that out, and you look at the bottom line, and boom, your cost is 20% less because you deleted some of the things that they said that they could do in-house. Well, maybe we don't need you to do editing. Okay, well, that's 20 hours per proposal in some cases. We don't, okay, we're gonna pull that out because maybe they have an in-house editor, or maybe they have someone who uploads stuff into Dropbox. But I'm gonna give you the full gamut of what I do. It's up to you to tell me what part of this you don't need. And that's done, i.e. a proposal, excuse me, an RFP. That's what an RFP is. An RFP is the government saying, here's what I want. You need to come back and tell me how you're going to provide it. And if it takes you more than a day, now I'm not saying for an RFP, because granted, RFP is different every single time. Every single time an RFP, it's customizable, but you have a baseline to start with. You know what you have. You know that I wrote out all of these things. I know I don't do them all every time, but it will save you time in the end. And the reason that most people, Renee, don't submit proposals or don't go after government contracting is they don't have that baseline proposal to begin with. And they just see themselves having to start like, oh, I got to spend all that. Just take 40 hours to write down every single thing you do, put a value to it. And I promise you, it won't take you no more than 15, 20 hours to do an RFP if it's what you're doing, if it's something that you continue to do on an ongoing basis.
Not only that, like you said, create a spreadsheet so that all of your costs are in one place so you can pull it out. You don't have to recreate the wheel.
Exactly.
I do have another question. It says, where do you include costs for overhead?
Overhead for the government, okay. Sometimes the government term is a little different. There's two indirect costs. And I think what most people say when they say overhead, what they really mean is indirect costs. There are two indirect cost pools with the government. One is called general and administrative, and that is your fixed costs. You're going to pay that whether you sell one house or 20. You still got to pay your office rent. You got to pay your secretary. You got to pay all of your costs. That G&A, that is general administrative costs in the government's eyes. Overhead, however, are those costs that are associated with that project only. That but for that project, you would not incur that cost. So let's just say you're doing a janitorial project and the government says, we want to go green. Or you have to wear these special kind of gloves, or you have to do some specialized training. Well, you got to add that in. So now maybe 10% of that contract, you have to increase by 10% because you got to spend, if it's $100, you got to spend $10 just going out and buying some gloves that you wouldn't have to normally buy. So you have to have that bucket. Now, how do you determine that G&A? Now that G&A is, I call it paying the house. every single unit. In the case of an hour, every hour. In the case of a square foot, every square foot has to bear the burden of paying the house. Okay, so if you bill 100 hours, 10%, and it's typically, we call it 10 and 10, 10% overhead, 10% G&A. That's just as a general rule, but sometimes your G&A, your overhead can be as high as 100%, especially if suppose the government requires you to be in DC every week. That's travel. You got to include that. You just can't, if you don't, you're going to pay them for what it takes to do, and all of a sudden you're paying the government to perform a contract. So that overhead, those indirect costs will cause you to lose your shirt if you don't do it just right. So using 10%, just automatically add 20% to your net price to make sure that you cover your costs, unless you know for a fact that your G&A percentage really is 30%. Let me tell y'all guys why that's important, okay? Many people, the first thing they want to do when they go after a contract, they want to know what the incumbent bid. Oh, he bid $100, I'm gonna bid 99. Okay, and lose your shirt while you're at it. You know why? You can't bid to beat the incumbent. You've got to bid a price, because guess what? Maybe he owns his building. Maybe he owns his equipment. Maybe he owns his cars. So unless you know how a person arrived at that number, you can't be the price to beat. You got to say, this is what it costs me. And you know what? Let me just explain in my technical why the government should pick me even though I'm higher. But don't ever, now you might want to just to see in terms of your level of competitiveness, but you can reduce your rate to match the incumbent if you want to. You're going to lose your shirt because now you are in the hole by 20% because that person didn't have to charge the government rent. Their G&A is 2% and yours is 30%.
All right, we do have another question, Linda,
Okay.
from Devan.
Okay.
Yes, my question. So Linda, my question is more of a challenge and kind of a vent on my part.
Okay.
So,
Get them
so
all the time.
stick with me for a second, right?
Okay.
So I am not sure I agree with you about LPTA, lowest price technical acceptable proposals, are actually best value.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because, pouring salt in the wound, but last year we submitted quite a few proposals that were LPTA, right? And we did not win them because we were not the lowest priced.
Okay.
But the debrief from the contracting officer assured me that our technical proposal was absolutely superb.
Okay.
We just didn't have the lowest price.
Okay. All right.
And and a lot of times the awardee, they have cut in so low until, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean,
Okay.
I've lost to companies that have bid probably 1 or 2% profit, and it had to been a G&A of 8-9%, which that just doesn't happen. And so
you think G&A of 8-9% is not doable?
No, 8 or 9%.
8 or 9?
Mm-hmm.
That's a company that runs slim. I mean, that's you want to be there. Yeah, anything. Yeah, you want, and a lot of companies can be there, but you win because of G&A, because everything else is going to be the same. You're going to probably pay your workers the same rate, but
Exactly.
G&A is where you win and lose.
That's
and
right.
So
that's
8 to 9% is really, I mean, that's wonderful. That's just a well-run company that doesn't have a lot of overhead. So I think it's extremely doable to get to 8 to 9%.
Or it's a company that is going to lose money on the contract, which is typically what's going to happen a lot of times.
Okay, so let me adjust that before you get too far.
Wait, one second, Linda. So let me tell you, just to finish the story.
Okay.
So we submitted a proposal last week, and it was just a basic clerical opportunity, providing people that were going to work in the scanning room. right?
Mm-hmm.
So we went in at a 7% G&A,
Okay.
2% profit,
Okay.
and we lost based on pricing
Okay.
on that, right?
Okay.
So we were not going to make any money anyway, a whole lot.
Okay.
We just wanted to get into the agency. But
Okay.
upon the debrief from the contracting officer, this is what she tells me. Great technical proposal, just lost on pricing, but don't be surprised if you see this on LPO again, because they won't be able to do the work. So it's like, why
Okay.
not give it to someone who can do who priced it right and can do the work?
Okay. All right. The first thing is, I think.
Devan, oh, excuse me.
Go ahead, Sam.
I'm glad you said that, because I was about to tell you, if they want it, let them have it. Don't worry about it. Just hang on to what you got, because it's going to come back again, and it's going to come back because they cannot perform the services. Andre, you still there? If you remember in the in Bethesda, with that company that came, if they want it, let them have it. The sad part about it is it depends on what the services that you're performing, and the recipients of that service is going to suffer.
And that's a good point, because one of the things I wanted to make about the LPTPA part is the operative word being technically acceptable. Okay, so there's so many ways to skin a cat. On staffing contracts, you're right. LPTA is always going to come down to the lowest price, because there's only how many ways can you recruit? Okay, but on solution-driven projects where technical acceptance or technical acceptability is based on something other than a process, something where there's a key discriminator. So part of your pipeline strategy might be, on staffing contracts, we don't do LPTA. Now, let me tell you how I suggest that people really, really can compete on LPTA by completely doing away with your G&A. Okay? I say this. Y'all listen to this now.
Oh,
I have clients. Listen. Okay. If you have anything, I tell people, state, local, and commercial contracts, yeah, you might make a mint, because they don't really care about buckets. You can win and don't even know why you win. I tell people, look, let your commercial contracts pay your house. That way you can zero out on federal contracts. Let your commercial contracts cover the cost of your entire office. Because if you're going to win at the table on government contracts, you're right, it's your G&A. Because we already know everybody's going to incur the same overhead costs. Everybody's going to pay the same SCA wage. They're going to pay $21. Right. Everybody's going to pay $21 an hour. So if you can zero that G&A out and let your commercial clients pay the cost of your office, you're going to always be competitive, because very few companies, especially federal government contractors, do they have commercial business. So it's worth it to go to get a commercial contract just to pay your bills, because it's a contract here, it's a contract there. Maybe you make some money, maybe you don't, but you don't care. You can zero out on profit. So now you're competitive in the commercial market, because you're basically charging zero profit. But now your costs are covered so that you can zero out your G&A, and now you're at the table with the big boys, and so you got the 2%. Some people just don't go after LPTA, except for, especially in staffing. I don't even see how people make money on staffing, except when you have good customers and they are willing to pay. Because I know, for example, like COVID-19, people who do medical staffing, they are winning right now, because the government realizes that the value of being able to find people who are willing to go in and work in these hospital areas, they're willing to pay for it. So you're not going to see it. I saw a sole source contract today for medical personnel. Sole source contract, no questions asked. Oh, you got some people that want to go to work? We'll take them. So you're right. LPTA has to be very service driven. But I think one of the ways to do that is to just decide which ones you're going to go LPTA on, and decide whether or not it's worth it to you. But the other way is, like I said, just Just do commercial business and zero out your G&A on LPTA contracts.
Yeah. Got
Okay.
it. Thank you.
We have another question. It says, as a new small business, what is your recommendation to winning that first contract?
Well, you can't win if you don't play. So I've always felt that submitting proposals is the best business development strategy ever. You can spend a year trying to build a relationship with the agency that if you submit one proposal is going to get you to the debriefing table. Where else do you get a one-on-one with somebody who buys what you sell? So if you submit 2-3 proposals a month and you don't win any, and you got 3 debriefings, that is way more valuable than spending $20,000 flying back and forth and going to this conference and that conference and whatnot. So the key to getting the first contract, in my mind, is one, I prefer that a company try subcontracting first, just to kind of go through the process, especially if they're new to government contracting. They, do a walkthrough with a subcontractor. And I forge a lot of teaming relationships because I have a young lady, we have a program called Employees Transitioning to Entrepreneurship. So the majority of my students in that class, they're contracting officers. They're contracting officers. So I have, 22 contracting officers that work for government agencies that are trying to become an entrepreneur. But I can say to them, oh, okay, you know what? I have a client that does this or that. So what we'll do is we will partner. We will say, okay, you work as a contracting officer for CDC, but there's nothing that says that you can't do business development for a contract with Department of Bureau of Standards. So I might say, okay, what is your purview? And she'll say, she might write the technical. So I'll take a newbie company who doesn't have any business development, maybe they're really, really good at what they're doing. And I might go to one of my contracting officers and say, okay, I need you to partner because you want to get your first contract. This person is already in business, but you have relationships. So why don't you come together and you go to the agency that you work at, because contracting officers know other contracting officers now. So you take one person who's really good at BD and one person who's really good at what they're doing and put them together. Another young lady just retired from the federal government, she retired 24 years in the military, and she also just retired from FEMA as a program manager. So she's got FEMA calling her every day saying, you got your company running yet? We got they sent her 4 contracts they wanted her to bid on, and she don't know nothing about nothing. So I teamed her with a company who did what it is that they were looking to do. So the best way to get your first contract is to team with somebody who has relationships, but don't necessarily have past performance.
Okay. I think that's all the questions we have. So what I want to do now, the time is working out really perfectly. I want to split us up like we did last time into 2 groups. Devan will be in one and Linda will be in the other.
Cool.
I am going to split you into just 2 groups of 8 and 9. I am going to pull and change both Linda and Devan at some point. I am going to try to allow them to finish answering any questions. And as a part of this, there's networking. Please feel free to collaborate, share ideas. We have a wealth of knowledge that's in the room as well as novices. And, there's always something that can be learned from someone. So I'm going to split you all up into groups and we'll come back at around 7. I'll give you probably 20. I'll give each group 20 minutes per person. So we'll come
Renee,
back. Devan?
Renee, I have a request, please.
Yes.
Would you allow Sam to take my place?
I will, absolutely.
Okay.
If
Sam, Sam, do you mind?
He's good? Okay, great. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No problem.
Okay. So
Yeah, no, only because, again, he's been at this a whole lot longer than I have. So I know a little bit, but Sam knows a lot.
and I thought about that, but I didn't want to just throw him in there because I didn't ask him.
But trust me, it's not about how long, it's about the quality of the people that you spend time with.
Absolutely.
Very good. Awesome. All right. So I will split you all up and then you will be changed to different groups, but feel free to introduce yourselves, network, and I will pop in and out and we'll come back and reconvene here at about 20 of 8 to give people enough, time to kind of chat amongst each other.
So I just stay here. I don't do anything. You just do the splitting.
I will do the splitting, my
Okay.
dear. You're going to end up in a room full of wonderful people.
Okay, great. Look forward to it.
Yes. So,
usually you have to go up and meet with the contracting officer and you talk about all those things. Well, this might be considered indirect costs, but you still got to cost load it. So look at that. I done spent 151 hours just on project administration. Well, what did I do? Well, I had to meet with the point of contact. I had to establish my performance standards. I had to do all these things. And now here's my assumptions. That's actually the scope. See these assumptions? I assumed that I would have to interview and review the procurement history of each department. So if there's 15 departments and I got to spend 4 hours each with them, this is how I came up with this number. Now that's a whole lot of hours to eat or not be accounted for when you get a contract. Cost loaded. Now you can, it's up to you if you want to add it to your indirect costs. If I put up there, you know, or you can zero this out and these can actually be direct costs, meaning you're going to charge them directly instead of increasing the total price by 25% to cover your costs. But you want to allow for it. Okay, project review. All right, well, here I am. I had to meet with the accounting department. I had to review each department. So I had to meet with each department first. Now I got to review the purchasing activity of each company. So I just want you to see that every single thing I did, I associated a value to it. How much? Oh, that's 301 hours. 301 hours to review existing policies and procedures. This was for City of College Park, where we went in and we changed their, not necessarily upgraded, but evaluated their purchasing department. Had to go in and figure out how they were doing things, how they was doing it, now how they're doing it differently. But look, every single thing I put a value to. Mm-hmm. Every single thing. Project improvement. Okay, I done reviewed everything. Now I got to modify. That's going to take 40 hours. Now I got to modify existing processes. Then I got to come back and say, okay, I done fixed everything, but here's some new stuff. Oh, that's going to take me about 20 hours. Okay. But look at my assumptions. It assumes modification of processes for every single sourcing type. I had to assume a minimum of 7 sources: manufacturing, professional services, equipment, construction, HVAC, telecommunications. So I had to figure that out. Otherwise, how would I know how to bid this? How would I know? Because remember, most people are asking for firm fixed price contracts now. They want a flat rate. If you're billing hourly, okay, you may not have to do this because you're going to be paid by the hour. But if you got to give somebody a flat rate, you got to do all of this to cover your costs. So you know exactly how much time it took and the assumptions that go with it. Okay. So that's just kind of, this is, and I'll be glad to share this, this template with you guys if you want it, but it's just my way of walking through what I had to do for that contract. And then as I was adding up the numbers, it was automatically on my summary. It was putting in. So at the end of the day, I put it all in and then I was like, whoo, it was a whopping. Now, if I would have had to guess, I probably would have undersold myself by $50,000 or $60,000 because I wouldn't have been able to calculate all of that in my head.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I am so blown away, totally impressed. I've met you a couple of times. I even had the pleasure of pushing your paperwork through NCMA when you did the sponsorship at the gala, and never knew you were the real deal, Holyfield.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
I will definitely be reaching out to you. I am in the in area shopping to get someone to do proposal writing for me.
Oh, great. Okay.
So let's have a conversation tomorrow if possible.
Absolutely. We certainly can.
Okay. I thoroughly enjoyed your training, though. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's
and
just
been taking notes.
Oh, good.
I got
that
you.
Is one component of our cost loading is one component of our fast track. We have a fast track where we go through Just like we do that for cost loading, we do it for proposal writing, we do it for pipeline management, we do it for everything. So that's just kind of one snippet of what Fast Track is all about.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You haven't gotten there yet, Dwight. That's Thursday.
Thank God.
So Linda,
Yeah.
since we've been talking about LPTAs, which, as you can tell, I hate them.
I know.
But because my thing is, I'm not looking to do any work for free for anybody.
That's right.
Especially the federal government. I mean, because they have all this money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to do any work for free. I don't have to make a whole lot of money.
And you don't. You just have to decide in terms of your proposal strategy or your vetting strategy. One of the things I do through Fast Track is I do what is called a vetting chart. Okay? And I think I can find one real quick. Vetting chart is where I take the 5, so I think it's 8 things, and I have you put them in order of preference. And you assign a value to it. So let's just say you get 20 opportunities, and you got to whittle it down to 10. Well, which 10 am I going to go after? Okay, well, in your case, if it's LPTA, it gets a 0. Maybe size of contract might get a 10. Yes. Maybe geographical scope might get an 8. Maybe whether or not you prime or sub is more important. So when you come up and you assign a value to each one of those things, you don't even have to look at it. Let your secretary do it. Anybody who can add. Because you don't want to use your skill set going through and reading all of these proposals when all someone has to do is to say, oh, this is being performed in Alabama. Okay, that gets a 10. Oh, this is less than $1 million. Oh, that gets a 5. And so, anything that scores 100 or less, you're not going after it. It's got to score over 100. So now you've just whittled down 20 opportunities down to the 3 or the top 3 that you want to go after, and they're doable. Some people, it's if they got 30 days to write it. So that's important to some people. Some people will only go after opportunities that they have a relationship with. Some people will only go after opportunities where they're the prime. So once you assign your vetting strategy, you will probably realize that there are more opportunities that are not LPTA than are, especially if you make it so the LPTA scores a 0.
What's the LPTA? What does that mean?
It stands for lowest price technically acceptable, meaning that when the government is reviewing your proposals, they have a pile. It's like, okay, here go number 1. Okay, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to put them in order of price, lowest on top. Then they're going to review it and see if the person was technically acceptable as determined by the evaluation factors. So if they did 7 font and the government said 10, they're tossed. Go down to the next one, the next one, the next one. So really you're hoping that somebody doesn't meet the mark, because it's so easy to not be technically acceptable, especially when the government has some room about evaluating, So that's again, technically acceptable means my transition plan is 10 days instead of 30. Now, when all things are equal, there's a key discriminator, and now you're more technically acceptable than someone else because you were able to do something quicker. So now that's kind of why I told the line with technically acceptable and best value, because the government can interpret technical acceptability however they want to.
Yeah, there's lots of subjectivity with technically.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Which is why when you're writing your proposal, and Dwight, you can attest to this, when you're writing your proposal, don't speak to the scope of work, speak to the evaluation factors.
Right.
So when I'm writing, I cut and paste the evaluation factors and the scope of work. I read the scope of work. Yeah, I can do it. But if they're evaluating me based on relevance, I'm going to speak to the relevance. I'm not going to talk about all this other stuff, because if you're telling me that you're going to evaluate my past performance based on whether or not I've done this for a government, and I know that I haven't, okay, that might decide that, you know what, I know I got good past performance, but it's not relevant because I don't have it for a government contract. You know what, my P-win just went down because it's likely that other people have done this and I haven't. So always, 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 when you're doing your compliance matrix, You pull out those evaluations before you even pull out the scope.
Yeah. And so Linda, let me caveat just one thing. All right.
Okay,
So
sure.
despite my disdain for LPTAs, right?
Yes.
Our first contract with the federal government, it was an LPTA.
It was or was not?
It was.
It was. Okay.
And it was a $32 million LPTA.
What?
Yes. First.
That's probably why LPTAs are your. That's probably why LPTAs score 50 on your vetting chart.
But he said he didn't like it. Now, how you not like it at 32 million?
You should like it 32 million reasons.
Yeah, I can't win anymore though. But because a lot of times the government has a strategy. With this particular contract, the incumbent had been around for 17 years, right? So it was a fat contract for them.
And I guarantee you
Have invoices, legitimate